Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Black Literature, Black History. This is Jason Williams, and tonight we're still not going to get into The Infants of the Spring by Wallace Thurman because I was reading Zora Neale Hurston's A Life in Letters, and I came across two things that I want to talk to you about tonight. Okay, the first thing was, if you recall when we were reading Blacker the Berry, Alva invited Emma Lou to a party of his friends where he introduced her to all of his writer friends, which turned out to be Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Wallace Thurman, and everyone that's in that little group of writers, the Harlem Literati. And Emma Lou felt intimidated, and later in the book, when Alva and Emma Lou had an argument, she accused Alva of introducing her to his friends just to make fun of her, to belittle her, and make her feel inferior because her self-esteem was so low. That's how she felt. Well, when I was reading Zora Neale Hurston's A Life in Letters, there was a time in her life where she was dating a man who felt belittled by her, emasculated, because Zora Neale Hurston has a very flamboyant and dominant personality. From the letters that we've been reading, you can see her personality. And this man had a low self-esteem because she invited this man to a party where she introduced him to Langston Hughes, Wallace Thurman, Carl Van Vechten, and all of her writer friends and buddies. And later they had an argument where he said that the only reason why she invited him to meet her friends was to put herself up on a pedestal and make her feel so much better than him and to emasculate him. And I just found that funny because that is the exact same thing that Wallace Thurman wrote in his book, Blacker the Berry. So you can see that these writers, as they were friends, buddies, and talked and have discussions, that they probably borrowed bits and pieces of each other's lives and put it into writing. Because that similarity that I saw was just too spot on to be coincidence. So that's just one thing that I found interesting in reading Zora Neale Hurston's A Life in Letters. The next thing that I found very interesting was the culmination of two subjects that are very taboo in the black community getting to a point where they throw Zora Neale Hurston under the bus. And I'm going to read you a section of what happened. But ultimately, Zora Neale Hurston was charged with sexual assault. And she was charged on sexual assault by a boy who was, one, mentally ill, and number two, who was considered homosexual. Now, mental illness and homosexuality are two subjects that the black community does not like to face. And in 1940s, Zora Neale Hurston found herself mixed up with a mentally ill boy, a possibly mentally ill mother, and the boy was also caught up in a homosexual act. And instead of the mother and the son facing this fact that they may be mentally ill or trying to take care of it, they accused Zora Neale Hurston of sexual harassment, of which later she was fully exonerated of all the charges, but that just puts a taint on your name. And another thing that I would like to address is Zora Neale Hurston's reaction to it. Now, in the black community, we always like to say, and rightfully so, that the actions of a few or of one black person is not representative of the entire race. And Zora Neale Hurston has stated that in her writings, and it's true. The actions of a few or one or two individuals does not represent the race. However, many times in the black community, when our race does something against us, or when a person or a group of people of our race do something against us, we ourselves blame the entire race or start to characterize the entire race as being against us, and Zora Neale Hurston did that. Zora Neale Hurston, though she was accused of sexual harassment by a group of people, she said she felt betrayed by her race. And that still goes on today. Even Monique, when she was fighting Netflix about the deal that she was supposed to get, or she felt that she should get, she said that the black people who were not siding with her, she said she felt betrayed, and it hurt her more because it was people of her own race than just those few individuals. So if we tell other races, don't try to categorize us by the actions of a group or a few, we shouldn't do that to ourselves. And we do that many times. A lot of times in the black community, if we look to black businesses to do something for us and we're not satisfied, we turn around and say, I'm never going to do business with the black business again, because we categorize the entire race based on the actions or the insufficient actions of a few. And that happened here. But I'm going to read to you what happened in Zora Neale Hurston's case. Okay, she wrote a letter to Carl Van Vechten where she talks about what she has been accused of. And I'm not going to start at the very beginning of the letter. I'm going to start at the part of the letter where she describes everything that happened. 124th Street is in a state of horror over the thing because they know that it is not true. I find that various simple people have been running around trying to make themselves heard by officialdom because they have no force, being ordinary colored people. The officials have stuck their necks out, Waldman says, and they must try to make good on it, knowing the consequences, that is, if they fail, which they must. 2 women of that 400 block hunted me up to express their indignation and to tell me that this Mame Allen was the landlady of Zora, and I'll actually read who she is. She's Hurston's former landlady and the mother of William Allen, one of the 3 boys listed as complainants. According to handwritten notes in the case file, Mame Allen was a Columbia University employee from January 1947 to August 1948. The district attorney's case notes that Allen resented her, Hurston, and that Allen doesn't like Zora. So that's who she was referring to in her letter. That this Mame Allen was in love with a man, married, whom she has been living with, and that she did not want the boy around, and that she had been trying for months to get him in some boarding school. He could not be placed because he is a mental defective. Then she began to seek some way to put him in an institution. She is quoted by Miss Davis and Miss Ryan as saying that she saw her chance when one boy named Robert yelled across the street and called her William a fairy. She began to watch, and a few days later caught her son and a boy named Jerry Whaley, co-complainant, in the act. She runs to the Children's Society, but then she does not wish to portray her son as a bad boy. He has been sinned against, not sinned himself. So she manufactured this horrible tale involving me, a man in the block named Rufus Corsair, a Puerto Rican woman who is married, and keeps a candy store on LaSalle Street and is the mother of 4 children. Aracelia Isari, not indicted in the case, saying that we all met this son of hers at 445th West 24th Street at 4:30 every Saturday, and all of us went with the boy and in the coal bin, and all being present and participating at the same time. I have never seen any of these people, and they do not know me even by sight. It seems to me that if the society really wanted to protect children, they would have made some sort of investigation of the home and the background of the boy. They did not know until I told them that I had urged the mother to take the boy to Bellevue back in the winter of 1946 and 1947 for observation and treatment. The mother herself is a defective and would not take the boy but a few times, stopping the observation and trying to deceive me by telling me the doctors there said that William was of extraordinary intelligence, a prodigy no less. So faced with the result of her foolishness and wanting to be rid of William, this has come about. The society now hates to admit that it has been victimized by a mental defective and is passing the buck by saying that it is up to the DA. They have committed the foulest crime of the century for leaving the havoc that they have wrought upon me as a public figure. Think of what happens to that mother of 4 children, that poor building superintendent who is lying in jail because he cannot make bail and his job gone and his name ruined. What real estate agent will hire this poor man after this? And I swear to you by all that I hold sacred that not one word of this vile charge is true. I invite you, because I value your trust, to ask questions and investigate to test my innocence. Do this for the sake of my memory. And then she goes on lamenting the case and everything, and then later she's exonerated. So this kind of relates to today because we have the Me Too movement, and many people are charging people of sexual harassment, and some of the charges are true, some of the charges are false, but people know that when you charge someone with sexual harassment, even if they're found innocent, their name is still smudged with that charge. Like she said, who's going to hire this man after being charged with that? You know, it says, what real estate agent will hire this poor man after this? And this is 2018, many years after this, so many of us don't know about this in Zora Neale Hurston's life. But this may have contributed to her downfall, because we do know that by the time Zora Neale Hurston died, she died penniless. Now I'm going to continue to read these letters. I may not do reports on them unless I find something interesting to report, but I'm going to continue to read these letters to see what ultimately happens. Now, the person who put these letters together, Carla PhD Kaplan. So Carla Kaplan, the woman who put these letters together, you know, in between many of these letters, she puts some biographical information. So I knew that this letters, or these series of letters concerning her being charged with sexual assault on the children was coming up, but I just had to find it. But she also states that all of Zora Neale Hurston's former friends, even Langston Hughes, were all set up to speak on her behalf as a character witness, that she is not the type of person who would do this type of crime to a child. But as you can see, the mother was in love with someone and wanted to be rid of her boy because he was a mental defective. Now, when we read Blacker the Berry, that child was a mental defective or mentally ill, and Alva and the woman that he had the child with were both contemplating leaving the house. The woman found out, or just through her intuition, she knew that Alva was on his way out, so she left first to leave him with the boy. And then by the end of the book, even though Emma Lou lived with Alva and started taking care of the boy, by the end of the book, she just left easily without thinking twice, even though it wasn't her child. But still, no, the black community does not like to acknowledge mental illness in the community. And in this instance, they threw Zora Neale Hurston under the bus because, number one, the child was mentally ill, and number two, he was gay. And they didn't want to air that knowledge. They didn't want to bring that out. Now, there's some other factors. There's another person who is involved in this case that comes up later, who is just spreading the rumor out everywhere because he's upset with Zora Neale Hurston not helping him commit perjury, and he lost money on a car that he was trying to swindle somebody, and since she didn't help him, he started spreading out this rumor everywhere. And even though it was totally false, because during the accusation, Zora Neale Hurston wasn't even in the country. She was in Honduras, gathering stories for her next book in anthropology, because she's an anthropologist by trade. So, but she still had to have lawyers. She still had to go through the ordeal. And then she threw her whole race under the bus because this is just how she was feeling. And she also says, and this happens in the North, not in the South. So she also started to lament on that, saying like the North is just as bad as the South, which it was. The North had its racism different than the South. It wasn't just outright, but the racism in the North was just as bad as racism in the South. It just wasn't flat out in your face. And so she just feels bad about that as well. But again, this is an interesting book that you should read. Zora Neale Hurston, A Life in Letters, put together by Carla Kaplan. This is Jason Williams with Black Literature, Black History. Have a nice evening.